Adventure Time has a bunch of characters that appear in either one or just a handful of episodes. Some of them are one-off villains, some of them are characters in need of our hero's help, but a couple of them, and often the most memorable of the bunch, are given their time as a protagonist of an episode. And out of all of them, I'm not sure there's a character in the show with less screen time and is beloved more than the focus of Season 5, Episode 34, The Vault. And that's what you're talking about today. In this video, we're going to go through both Shoko's journey and the Finn frame story that surrounds it, and talk about how, through this immensely fascinating look into the past of the Candy Kingdom, Adventure Time explores the general dangers of not properly addressing the past.
Oh yeah, the vault. That's where the stuff I can't handle goes. Kerplunk.
Unlike a good chunk of this episode's contemporaries in the Adventure Time flashback space, we actually get a pretty chunky frame story before getting into the actual events of the past. We start off in the treehouse, where Finn is standing in the kitchen, seemingly cooking nothing, only for the ghosts from the creeps to show up and begin to torment him. A battle that is quickly revealed to be a dream that Finn is having while sleepwalking. Throughout this nightmare, the ghost completely encompasses Finn, seemingly slowly taking his entire body over before Jake jolts him awake, only to find that Finn doesn't remember anything from the interaction. In fact, when Jake tries to bring up the fact that Finn is repressing whatever is bothering him in his sleep, Finn acknowledges that he fully understands this, even bringing up his titular vault, a place that, as mentioned earlier in the series, Finn keeps all the parts of his past that he doesn't want bothering him. Although, the events of this episode seem to indicate that this strategy isn't exactly working. When Jake, going into Big Brother mode, tries to talk Finn through the process of retrieving these memories from the vault and actually trying to deal with them, Finn's body physically responds by shivering as he screams no. Of course, Jake isn't just gonna let his brother be completely tortured by some mystery trauma that he isn't even aware of, as he concocts a plan while Finn is busy cleaning up the kitchen that he wrecked while fighting the ghost. While Jake largely exists in this one to just set everything into motion, I think this is quietly a great example of their brotherly connection, as he essentially forces Finn to do what's best for him and actually confront what's bothering him, even if Jake has no idea what Finn is about to uncover about himself. Speaking of which, Jake's plan comes in the form of a new video game on BMO, Regression Simulator, which is visually represented to the audience with visuals that are non-coincidentally very similar to the first level of Super Hexagon, a game that, coincidentally, I have spent an unreasonable amount of time playing. Anyway, back to the episode. The game seemingly has the ability to allow one to see what they've repressed in their subconscious mind, as Finn is able to see 4 of his past lives back to back to back to back. The first of which is the only one that has been hinted at before this point in the series, being a butterfly, the same as Finn's astral beast back in Still. The second of which is a comet, something that seems completely random at the time, but ultimately, as soon as next season, probably becomes the most important of the bunch. On the other side of the importance spectrum is number 3, which is a pink shimmery lump that vaguely seems candy-esque, but not clearly enough to make any conclusions. Of course though, the focus of this episode comes in the 4th and final past life that we see, which is none other than the tiger riding Shoko, whose final few days make up the next 7 or so minutes of the episode. I promise that we'll get to the actual story of this one in a second, but I gotta spend at least a little bit of time talking about how much I love Shoko as a character. Not including her ghost form or the little cameo in Together Again, this is the last time that we ever see her. And while I do fully understand that it's the ending of this episode that's likely to blame for that, I can't help but wonder if she could have been used in more stories. I just adore the Princess Mononoke vibes as she rides atop her nameless feline, and in general, Shoko is this perfect blend of being somewhat similar to Finn in demeanor and design, while also feeling like a completely completely unique spin on what a powerless character in the chaos of Ooh might look like. Also, I'll get more into this as we progress throughout the episode, but there is such an interesting inner conflict in this character for the 7 or so minutes she's in the show, as her first experience with somebody actually being kind to her completely wrecks her thievery lifestyle. Also, just like the rest of this episode, Shoko is tremendously funny, with some absolutely terrific line deliveries that make her undeniably likable from start to finish.
Stay away from me, you gang boy! Ah!
In general, for the first character that we get an extended look at from a different time period, as well as being the character who is tasked with introducing us to the idea of reincarnation in this show, Shoko excels in both roles, making for an absolute terrific character to follow. Speaking of which, let's finally get into her actual journey, which starts with the character looking for work with the absolutely hilarious boss of the Bath Boy gang. Besides the absurdity of this interaction, Shoko's negotiation for her job of capturing the amulet gives you a good look into her goals, as despite an offer to join the presumably evil Bath Boy gang, she declines, only wanting the money necessary to continue surviving. Throughout this episode, Shoko is never presented as a character who desires to do bad things. She's just trying to survive in a post-bomb Ooh, which makes all of the things we're about to talk about all the more tragic. As Shoko makes her way into the Candy Kingdom, we get to finally meet whoever was leading the kingdom all of those years ago, as their mysterious leader unveils their cloak, and yeah, it's still bubblegum. It's kind of hard to remember when you rewatch the series that you aren't supposed to know that Bonnie is hundreds of years old until this point, but it is a somewhat large reveal, especially with this episode being about reincarnation, and the implication that that doesn't exactly apply to Princess Bubblegum. Besides also just having some fantastic lines,
Except young Mr. Cream Puff. He's like my boyfriend. Anyway,
Bonnie spends this episode taking in Shoko, and for the first time in her life, showing Shoko genuine kindness. While it is kind of hard to tell whether or not Shoko is making up the backstory that she tells PB about how she lost her arm when her parents sold it, or how she learned to fight when they abandoned her at a dojo, I don't think it's hard to tell that Shoko has obviously had some people in the past not exactly treat her super well, so PB being completely willing to take her in and even letting her see the brand new Secret Gumball Guardians completely catches Shoko off guard. The montage of the pair working on the Guardians is really sweet too, and it all leads into PB getting a gift for Shoko, the same thing she's going to give Finn in several hundred years, a robot arm. And because, as I mentioned before, Shoko's arm was lost as a result of people who should have been taking care of her not doing so, seeing PB, the person she's about to rob, give her a brand new arm completely breaks Shoko, as she finds herself unable to even look at her future victim. After running off to her room, when Shoko tries on the arm, she finds herself trying to decide whether or not she can face the consequences of bailing on her agreement to steal the amulet. And unfortunately, she just isn't. Throughout this scene, there is such fantastic lighting around Shoko's eyes, as she sees a way out of the darkness, but still decides to go through with what she promised. And when Shoko goes to take the amulet, even using the robotic arm that PB gave her, she's almost immediately punished, as the Gumball Guardians that she helped build inadvertently launch her into the radioactive river, where her only two friends, her tiger and now PB, are forced to watch her perish. Skipping ahead a little bit, the last time that we ever see Shoko alive features the character in a state that resembles her ghost, as the radioactive river hasn't quite finished her off yet. And as we watch her grasp the amulet she so desperately desired with her brand new arm, we get one of the most stunning shots in the first half of the series, as the character lies in front of the sunset, and more specifically, in front of a tiny sapling. A sapling that fades into the treehouse hundreds of years later. Speaking of which, back at that treehouse, Finn wakes up from watching Shoko's journey and immediately knows what he must do, calling Princess Bubblegum to make amends and waiting at the door for her to arrive, being more than ready to do what needs to be done. And while Shoko once again causes him to wreck his kitchen, this time it's with purpose, as he digs up the amulet held by the ghost and gives it to PB, who immediately recognizes the skeleton of Shoko, proving that their few days spent working together truly affected a younger Bonnie. And after a quick mention from Finn about PB's actual age, a comment that she awkwardly laughs at, the final few moments of this episode see a content Shoko, as Finn gives one final remark.
My vault feels lighter.
Just like this episode, the rest of the video is going to be split into a Finn half and a Shoko half, starting with our modern day hero. As indicated by the title of this episode, this one is all about Finn getting over his habit of repressing painful memories instead of dealing with them. Although, obviously, Shoko's past is not exactly an average part of his vault. And while Finn starts this episode by having to constantly battle with ghosts from his past, wrecking the stuff around him in the process, when he actually gets to the bottom of what's troubling him, he's able to address it straight on, causing his vault to become a little bit lighter. This is an idea that the show will continue to revisit, most pointedly in the finale, but I think it's a really interesting look into Finn's psyche in regards to how he deals with past trauma. Anyway, back to Shoko. Besides just having a sick design, the character also has, in her very limited screen time, a journey that showcases her making a mistake as a result of her upbringing, and then spending the next several hundred years trying to make it right. As I talked about back in my video on the Wild Hunt, the idea that somebody with a hero heart like Finn could still be driven to doing terrible things is something this series will explore more heavily with Fern, but I think you can make an argument that they do a similar thing in this episode with Shoko. The reason that she still betrays PB's trust is, given how everybody else has treated her, she just doesn't know how to make sense of what it means when Bonnie genuinely does a kind gesture for her. Even before she takes the amulet, there is a part of Shoko that already regrets what she's about to do, and after she immediately faces swift consequences for doing so, the rest of her begins to feel that remorse as well. And it's because of this regret that, when Shoko is seen as a ghost, it's in the mutated representation of her act of betrayal, something that changes as soon as PB gets the amulet back. Throughout Adventure Time, pretty much every character, from Finn to the Lich, besides BMO because he's perfect, does some pretty jacked up stuff, but what separates the good guys from the villains are those who try and make things right. And even if Shoko died a villain, Finn finally gives her an opportunity for atonement, and it's this opportunity that allows her to finally move on. Anyway, that's about it for me. If you want a way to complain about the fact that PB's amulet never comes up again in a way that's harder for me to ignore in the comments, you can find my Twitter in the description. But either way, this has been AmpleSamuel, and I'll see you in about a week with a video that has unfortunately less Shoko. Thanks for watching.